The following action research plan will be implemented throughout a 30-day, 6-week professional learning placement at Mount Riverview Public School. Utilising the core principles of the MEE framework, the project aims to analyse the mechanisms of dialogic pedagogy and how this approach to teaching and learning impacts student motivation and engagement. Established in the Lower Blue Mountains in 1971, Mount Riverview Public School comprises 217 students from 140 families, including 13% from non-English speaking backgrounds and 5% from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander backgrounds. As per the school's vision statement, the acquisition and use of knowledge is grounded heavily in the values of optimism, empowerment, citizenship, excellence, and discovery, whereby diverse, engaging, and stimulating learning environments are captivated through 21st century perspective and experience. The school is committed to fulfilling the full potential of all learners and thus aims to cultivate productive and inclusive relationships between students, teachers, parents, and wider community members. Of the 9 classes at Mount Riverview Public School, for my practicum, I was placed in the school's single Stage 2 Year 3 cohort. The class was comprised of 29 diverse learners, each possessing a multitude of academic, social, and emotional strengths and limitations that differentiated their learning needs and relationships with school and education. Having worked in 3 countries over a 30-year span, my mentor maintained a wealth of experience and knowledge that complemented and extended the positive and nurturing nature of the school's approach to teaching and learning. Pedagogically, her practice encompassed a holistic, substantive, and contextual nature, and as such reflected remarkable capacity to cater for the myriad of complex learning needs across the entire class, while simultaneously maintaining learner motivation and engagement. Corresponding to the professional growth and development cultivated through action research, I recognise the flexible, inclusive, and nurturing nature of my mentor's classroom as an ideal backdrop to experientially explore and reflect upon the mechanisms of dialogic pedagogy, and more explicitly, how this approach to teaching and learning impacts student motivation and engagement. While higher order critical, creative, collaborative, and innovative thinking skills now permeate 21st century pedagogy, educators have been redefined as mediators of knowledge, who in scaffolding learning experiences across multiple modalities provide students with the broad yet flexible skills required for the complexities of modern society. Consistent with this landscape, dialogic learning spaces form a reciprocal platform for learners to articulate, synthesize, exchange, reason, and develop their knowledge and understandings as valued yet equal agents of the classroom. While I believe a dialogic landscape will offer students mutual, active, and reflective ownership of their learning, in understanding the complex psychological and sociological underpinnings of student motivation and engagement, its value will be measured in parallel with the MEE framework, thus forming the basis of my action research. While the students of my assigned class possess a range of abilities and learning needs, to facilitate dialogic learning spaces, in addition to my own research, observations, and assessment strategies, I will work closely with my mentor to devise flexible and inclusive opportunities for communication, collaboration, and criticality. This not only aims to support substantial student engagement through cognitive challenge, active involvement, and empowerment, but also, coupled with my willingness to challenge and refine my own beliefs and practices, to foster my growth and development as an effective, flexible, and student-centered educator. Consistent with the school's diverse and multicultural demographic, I recognise the overarching theme of belonging in Irina Cobold's 2014 picture book My Two Blankets as an ideal medium to not only explore key visual and linguistic features of text, but to also facilitate a broader sense of connection, community, and engagement within the classroom. While the story explores a first-person narration of a young refugee girl's transition between her old and new life, the text invites an exploration of connotation, imagery, and symbol, which has underlined the teaching and learning experiences driving my action research. For the first learning experience, following a brief introduction to the book, I will read the narrative to the class before facilitating a reflective discussion exploring its theme of belonging. Students are encouraged to mutually think and share their ideas about the narrative, how these circumstances have affected the main character and why, and how they might feel in a similar situation. To conclude the lesson, students consider the point of view of the story's main character and imagine themselves in a foreign country with no friends or linguistic knowledge. From this perspective, students will write a letter to a friend or family member sharing these experiences and expressing their feelings. The second learning experience explores the visual elements within the book, focusing specifically on its symbolic use of colour. Following an interactive exploration of the author's use of colour and how it has been used to convey meaning, students will colour a stenciled excerpt from the book to create and express their own ideas and meaning interpreted from the narrative. To conclude, students will present their work to the class, justifying their use of colour and its intended connotation. Peers will observe each other's artwork and contribute their own feelings and interpretations to the discussion. The final experience explores the author's use of figurative language, with specific focus on metaphors and similes. After reading through the story, I will critically discuss the metaphors and similes used within, inviting students to elaborate on their function and underlining purpose. In pairs, students will then create metaphors and similes consistent with the character's perspective and narrative's theme of belonging. To conclude, students will rewrite their letters from the first lesson using metaphors and similes to help express their feelings and improve their quality of work. In combination with the individualized and supportive relationships I aim to foster with my students to empower and motivate them as independent, capable learners, within this unit of work, mutually shared dialogic spaces are intended to drive cognitive, operative, and effective learning experiences that empower all students with voice, choice, and control. Consistent with the sociological or relational level of the MEE framework, these experiences aim to nurture students to higher quality relationships and enjoyment in the classroom, thus enhancing their appreciation, commitment, and overall engagement to their education. To assess the value and validity of dialogic teaching practices apropos to student engagement, in conjunction with syllabus outcomes, I will draw from a broad range of data sources to document student achievement, contribution, and investment, not only to identify, measure, and reflect upon their learning needs, but to also reveal the strengths and limitations of my own pedagogical practices, and thus a basis for professional growth and development. Work samples will be collected and annotated throughout this project to measure the cognitive, operative, and effective engagement of each student. Revealing a multitude of both teaching and learning data, these samples will be critically, analytically, and reflectively contemplated alongside my mentor to ensure accurate inferences and effective pedagogical interventions are identified and implemented. Similarly, observation schedules will be used to monitor the individual contributions and interactions of each student. In conjunction with my mentor's observations, this data, alongside my professional reflections, will again be critically and reflectively analysed in order to identify areas of need within both domains of the teaching and learning cycle, and therefore establish appropriate strategies and learning goals to foster improvement. Lastly, drawing from the REAL framework of self-assessment, students will reflect on each lesson and evaluate their own learning experiences at cognitive, operative, and effective levels. While empowering students as active and valued agents of the classroom, additionally, as an educator, student self-reflections will provide me with direct insight into the motivation and engagement of all learners, and thus a valuable medium to adjust and enhance future learning experiences and outcomes. While syllabus outcomes will determine the academic achievement of students, apropos to student engagement, the data collected will be analysed explicitly against the sociological sector of the MEE framework. in order to interpret the means by which students engage or disengage to my pedagogical philosophies and practices. By design, each lesson of the unit aims to pillar the active participation, genuine valuing, and reflective involvement in deep understandings of students, which, in conjunction with the data collected, will allow me to measure engagement levels across the class and strategize appropriate interventions moving forward. Consistent with the student-centered nucleus permeating 21st century pedagogy, I anticipate the dialogic learning experiences proposed within this action research plan to prompt student interest, stimulate deep and critical thought, expand understandings and democratic capacities, and empower student voice, choice, and control. Implemented alongside the sociological and psychological underpinnings of the MEE framework, the facilitation of high cognitive, operative, and effective learning experiences will nurture students to high-quality relationships and enjoyment in the classroom, thus enhancing their appreciation, commitment, and overall engagement to their education. Inherent in the design of action research, throughout this project, my own development as an educator will be concurrently nurtured. Parallel to my own willingness to challenge and refine my pedagogical beliefs and practices, my development throughout this project will align explicitly to the Australian Institute for Teaching and School Leadership's professional teaching standards. In practice, this action research project will allow me to identify my professional learning needs, synthesize a broad range of pedagogical research, and apply professional feedback from my mentor and her colleagues to build upon and improve my professional knowledge base and practice. Furthermore, through the pedagogical interventions of dialogic teaching spaces and the MEE framework, my ability to understand how students learn, support student engagement, facilitate effective communication, and evaluate, reflect, and improve upon my own teaching programs will augment my skills and proficiencies as an effective and flexible 21st century educator.